Put that coffee down.
I'm not here to waste your time, okay? I certainly hope you're not here to waste mine. So I'm gonna keep this short.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
Most valuable commodity I know of is information. Wouldn't you agree?
Coffee's for closers only.
Hey there, friends. Welcome back to the Behind Your Back podcast with me, Bradley Hartman, sponsored by Boise Cascade Engineered Wood Products. Boise Cascade, they help you move faster and build stronger. They make it easier to get more done. And our friends at Materials Exchange, they're the LBM industry's answer to E-Trade. They are your digital marketplace for lumber and panels. Materials Exchange. On this podcast, the Behind Your Back podcast, we talk about leadership, personal productivity, time management, and the craft of selling in the construction industry. And oh, what a time it is to sell in the construction industry. Now, over the last 12 months, I feel like we've been using this term unprecedented in an unprecedented number of situations. However, in this case, unprecedented is the apt term. I subscribe to Jim Schumacher, who's a sales rep at Par Lumber in the Pacific Northwest. He puts out what he calls the Shoes Lumber Report every week. And the headline for him this week was, "Are we there yet? How much higher can we go?" And then he lists off the different products and species and tracks a historical perspective from 1995 to 2021 to current day. And he identifies with a simple line graph on where these prices fall historically. So he starts off with a 2x4 or better kiln-dried hem fir, and then he moves down. So 2x4, record high. 2x6, record high. 2x10, record high. 2x12, record high. 4x10, record high. 2x4, Western SPF, record high. Record high, record high, record high, record high, record high. King stud 4x8 times 7, record high. Right, you get the idea. There are record highs like literally across the board, which is stunning. And in next Monday's episode, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about some of the pushback that I've been getting. And in many cases, it has been deserved, or at least part of it. When folks telling me, "Listen, Hartman, I understand what you're saying with the prospecting, but dude, you have no idea what it's like. We're hearing the same questions over and over and over again." And I say, I do get it. I spend my days talking to people like you, so I do understand. However, I come from the home builder side, and my roots are from that side of the desk. And a lot of my close friends own home building companies. And I think part of the value I can bring is I can step on both sides and say, hey, here's some unique ideas, okay? We know the business is cyclical. This will come down in some amount of due time. Just recognize that right now, you are having the situation that you've been wanting forever. Builders beating down your door wanting to talk to you, right? So how do we do that? How do we have a larger conversation that says, let me explain to you the reality of what we're living through today. However, let's not lose sight of the bigger picture. Prices go up and prices go down, and yeah, it's painful now. However, when it's trading at, a couple $100 a thousand, you know what? We're not going to be having these conversations, and the power will then shift back to the builders, right? So this is all a preamble to our guest today, Mr. Barry Nelson, and some new products that he has that can help the builders on-site offset costs. And why is that important? Well, there's nothing you can do about the price of a 2x4 or better coast kiln-dried hem fir. It is what it is. However, we can also think creatively about other ways that we can help you lower costs. And do you want to have that conversation? Because while I can't lower this price unilaterally, I can help you think better about running a better operation. And if you've been to any job site, just look around. There's ideas all over the place for even the best of the builders. So, no, I can't lower the price over here. And yes, I know you're getting hammered on lumber. However, if you want to offset costs, I've got some ideas. That is what I expected when I was purchasing at Pulte Homes. Whether the price was high or low, if you're ever going to raise my prices, just give me some ideas to help me think better. Give me some ideas, and it doesn't have to be about the products you sell. It can be about anything. If you sell lumber and you notice that the painter is doing things ass backwards and costing you time and money, then bring those ideas up. All ideas are on the table. So In the spirit of all ideas on the table, I'm excited to share my conversation with you with Mr. Barry Nelson, because he has a new product that can help builders have better conversations on site. And they can change culture, speed, productivity, and decrease the number of safety incidents on site. So who is Barry Nelson? Well, Barry Nelson has been around for a long time, started his career with DPR in California, and in 2008, his business, Design, Build, Own, and Operate, also known as DBO2, was acquired by Industrial Scientific Corporation. This has only fueled his interest in finding unique ways to have better conversations, to increase productivity, increase collaboration, and decrease safety incidents. His new product is called Smart Tagit, and it's an integrated application to share, coach, and mitigate potential hazards on the job, address human factor opportunities, and better engage field leaders. Now, for builders right now, this is a way that they can run a better business and increase profitability by doing it right the first time and collaborating more effectively, right? And engaging and find unique ways to solve their own itch. And as a superintendent and a project manager, I used to have daily meetings with the key foreman on site to keep everybody focused on the most important things that had to get done that day and that week. For many, that was surprising. That wasn't done often, as common sense as it was for me. And oftentimes miscommunication, and you know this, you feel the miscommunication on these builders' job sites. Well, this is a potential solution to some of that. And here's a testimonial from Dave Murphy at Pepper Construction. He said, Smart Tagit is self-healing. When's the last time somebody said that about your product, or hell, my product? I don't think I'm self-healing, but I hope to be one day. He says, it's enabling people to help each other. When you can see and hear each other and everyone has the full context of a situation, then it enables an accelerated peer-to-peer opportunity for improvement. Okay? So here's what I want you to think about. Have a different conversation with your builders. Ideally, not one about the record highs in the lumber that you can't do anything about. However, leveraging technology, you can help them run a better business on the job site. So that's what I want you to think about as you hear my conversation with Mr. Barry Nelson. So in this episode, we talk about why daily forms, audits, and observations and inspections are not completed, and they don't tell you what you need to know. We talk about the elements of a meaningful conversation on the job, which seems intuitive, but it's not. It deserves more introspection, and hopefully you'll get some insights from this. And we also talk about developing a culture from the bottom up and top down. You're going to walk away from my conversation with specific ways senior leaders can identify and change the culture at the job site level. And we're also going to give you access to a simple one-page overview of the 7 elements of a strong planning conversation on the job site. Think this through. We're talking about culture. We're talking about meaningful conversations within our own team. So I firmly believe this conversation will help you and your own team. And it will also give you an idea that you could potentially take to a builder to say, no, I can't do anything about the record high on the 2x4s. However, here's a different idea. I'd recommend you share this podcast with them. Have them look into Smart Tagit. It is unique. It is interesting. And I will let you think about its impact it could have and whether or not it's worth the conversation with your clients and prospects. But this is a way to have a different conversation other than price that you can't do anything about. Supply and demand curves, they're going to run their own schedule. This is something that we can impact. And so without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Mr. Barry Nelson. His newest product is Smart Tagit, and his company is FactorLab. So, Mr. Barry Nelson, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well,
Bradley.
I've had so much fun talking with you over the last several months, and it's like, hey, I've got 15 minutes, and I look down, and it's been like 70. So if we hit the 4-hour mark, we've gone too far. Otherwise, we should be good.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you so much for doing this. I can't wait to talk to you. You know I'm a huge fan.
All right. Well, appreciate it. So let's jump in. We always start off with our first 4. So, Mr. Barry Nelson, do you remember the first music album you either purchased or received?
Yes. AC/DC, Back in Black. It was standing outside of middle school, and a guy drove by in a Camaro with it blaring out of the windows, as it should be. And it was sort of my awakening to teenagehood. I was like, oh my God, it's the greatest thing ever. So, yep, there you go. That was my very first time. I'm not saying it's the world's greatest album, but it's a pretty good album.
It is. You get some solid street cred. And remind me, where did you grow up?
South Texas, Lake Jackson, Texas, south of, going down to Freeport, Gulf of Mexico, that part of the world.
I know exactly where that is. Worked on some liquefied natural gas plants down there. So
that's right, out of Freeport. That's the big hub.
You got it. All right. What about the first concert you attended?
First concert that I attended was Ted Nugent, Cat Scratch Fever. Okay. If that doesn't date me, I don't know what does. And by the way, I went without permission. So I got home, there was a note on my bed from my mom that said, I know where you were, don't try and hide the t-shirt. So it's a true story.
That's awesome. Cat Scratch Fever. I can hear it playing right now in my head for sure.
I don't know if that was I remember that was a big song. I think it was the name of it. I mean, again, this is a long time ago, man. So
what about your first job? The first paying job where you're getting taxed and everything?
Blunt's grocery store, Angleton, Texas, carrying groceries to the cars back in the day when you did that sort of stuff. And I loved it because you could get tips. So a couple pleases and thank yous and a little hustle. And I was rolling in like $6 or whatever it was at the time. So I loved it. I still remember that job and loved that job. Kind of would, maybe do it again.
What about your first car? The first one that was your car?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. The first car that I remember, which I would call it my car, is a little yellow Toyota Tacoma pickup truck. This would have been in like 1979, 1980. Okay. Loved that thing. It was an awesome little car. They weren't nearly as cool as they are today. They were just little runaround deals, but loved that thing. It was awesome.
Those are the ones you could put on. It's like 700,000 miles and be like, yeah, we should probably change the oil sooner or later. Like they just ran forever.
Oh, exactly. We never washed it. It was anyway, but I loved that little truck. Yeah. And we take it to the beach and it was really nice. Anyway.
Got it. Well, cool. Well, I'm excited to jump in with you on this. It's stuff we've talked about a lot of different things, but I think things are so fundamental, not only to just general interaction, but really safety and productivity and efficiency on the job site. So there will not be any listener who's listening who will say, well, I'm not sure this really applies to me. So what I'd like to do is I want to start really at this daily safety planning conversation. And then what I'll try to do, and we'll just kind of see where the conversation takes us as we normally do. We'll back it out to kind of conversations in general. And then I really want to talk about behaviors that really drive culture and change culture if needed be. And I know you have shared a ton of insight and taught me quite a bit on all three of these levels. But maybe before I jump in just there's what initially drew you to safety and kind of to this passion to the industry?
It's like almost everything that's happened in my life. It was one of these things where I was wrong about it in the beginning, So I was working for DPR Construction back 20 years ago or so, and we'd built their sales forecasting and planning system. This is back when Salesforce didn't even exist at this time. So this is way back then. Long story short, the guy who was running safety there was trying to win an award from Intel. Okay. And the deal was, hey, can you do the same thing, this like forecasting thing? Because then again, you got to think about it. This is like 20 plus years ago. Forecasting was almost magical. When we were doing like digital forecasting and building models for forecasting, it's like, well, could you do the same thing? Because I'm trying to figure out, A, I want to win this award, and B, I want to know which of my subcontractors is most at risk. Mm-hmm. Can you put my checklist on a Palm Pilot? And I said, no. I said, no, can't do that because I'm building this sales thing and I don't know anything about that. And we had a big fight about it internally. And my team kind of won it over or whatever. And we said, okay, we'll give it a shot. Okay. And so we started putting it together. We didn't know anything about safety. We didn't know any of that stuff. And it just like all things, it turned out that it was a really, really interesting problem. And it got more interesting over time. And we learned a lot. We learned a whole bunch of things that we thought were true or not true and all of that. And before you know it, kind of caught a fire. And that's what got me sucked into the space and been at it ever since.
Got it. Well, I talked to a friend of both of ours, a mutual acquaintance, if you will. And he said, just get Barry going. He said he's provided so much insight and helped this individual personally when it comes to this discussion, this daily safety planning discussion. And when he first said that to me, again, being in the industry, but not being a person who participates in those every day, I don't lead them every day. I'm around them tangentially. My first thought was, yeah, is this a real issue? Because it seems like this is like the most common thing that happens if you want to keep people safe. Maybe go into this. Why is this such an issue today?
Well, I mean, this is really, really, this is like a loaded thing for me. This is super, super important because it touches on so many things. So let me go tie that other thing you said before and then tie this thing. So
sure.
20-something years ago, building Palm Pilots, make a checklist, all this other stuff. So, I mean, I've seen that, done that stuff. Along that journey of figuring out, well, what really matters? We built this model with Jaime out of the Carnegie Mellon University where you could actually use all these inspection things to predict an accident or injury. We've met with all of the behavioral scientists and the guys who invented behavior-based safety and all that is all really good. And it boils down to, though, something that's really, really fundamental. And the fundamental thing is the most important conversation that really happens every day is the conversation between the crew leader and those closest to the work. Mm-hmm. And if that conversation contains, it's like a nuclear bomb of opportunity. If they espouse and follow and share the, solid beliefs and they care and they want to get people engaged and they, all the things that they do, that's going to directly impact all those people who are actually driving all the nails. And so if we could understand that conversation, that really opens up the door to understanding a lot, not only about the individual conversation, but really in the bigger sense, like, where is this organization? Where is this guy? Where is this group of people at on their journey to trying to get home safely? Mm-hmm. So that's why this is super, super important. And it happens every day. And it's a complete, utter disaster today. So I can tell you all about, how I feel about that. It's just a big mess, but that's, and it's unnecessary. Maybe, it doesn't have to be that way. It had to be that way, I think, for a long time, but I think technology is in a place now where it doesn't have to be that way anymore.
Well, I think we should go into this because I'm sure there are folks that are listening right now, and we have this conversation frequently, and we'll talk about this later, where my angle to this, as you know, is coming from our collaboration and our work to really overcome the language barrier between English and Spanish, and also the cultural barriers of, hey, you and I might be working every day together, but I see the world very differently than you do, and what's driving my behavior is different. But I will talk to folks, and they'll say, well, let's just set the language barrier aside, and the cultural barrier aside is, yeah, this conversation, we have a daily planning process, and we've got a form, and we got to check it out, and we save it, we scan it in. Yeah, I don't know, maybe it's a B plus, A minus, and when I kind of challenge them on that, or people might have been exposed and been around you, and all of a sudden their mind has changed. If someone's listening, they're like, I'm not sure this is a really big issue for me. How might you begin to kind of change that perception to maybe look at this conversation a little bit differently, knowing the sheer number of individuals involved and kind of the status quo, which isn't working for most people?
It's a lot wrapped up in that question. So let me see if I can try and tack up the answer.
It's my specialty.
So let's do this. I tell this little story sometimes when I talk about what it would be like. Imagine yourself, what we do to people every day.
Yeah.
Everybody who works in an office, imagine if you said, okay, I got this brilliant idea. What we're going to do is I'm going to have you come into the conference room, and you're going to sit down in the conference room, and then I'm going to have the CEO of the company. He's going to sit at the head of that conference table. He's going to get out a piece of paper, and he's going to read it to everybody in the conference room. And you're going to sit there and you're going to listen every day to him reading this piece of paper. Then at the end of that, he's going to put the piece of paper on the table, and then you're going to sign it, and then you're going to go do whatever it is you're supposed to go do. Mm-hmm. And God forbid if you ever get hurt, because what's going to happen is we're going to come back and say, remember that piece of paper that your CEO read to you that you signed? Now you're somehow responsible for that. It impacts whether your family gets any money or something. How in the heck would you feel about that?
Right.
You wouldn't do that. Right. It's terrible. And so this activity it is a very, very important activity. I mean, by the way, people are all confused about it, but it's really not that sort of confusing if you boil it down. It is a good idea for the frontline leader to have a conversation with those closest to the work relative to what we're going to do today and how we're going to do it, and not hurt ourselves or hurt someone else. It's not any more complicated than that. Now, notice in there was a lot of stuff I said about have a conversation, not about write a bunch of stuff on a piece of paper and sort of imagine that someone had a conversation. Mm-hmm. And that's the big disconnect today. We've gotten, and I think back to your point, your heart of your question, which is, why do you care? We spend, I don't even know, I've never done the math, but think of the jillions of dollars that are spent every day for people to sit down. And by the way, torture people. Okay, you didn't get into construction because most people want to write theses. You don't get into construction because you're a great speller. So what you're going to do is I'm going to make you do this anyway. I'm going to, because it's convenient for me. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to write it down, and then we're going to pretend like somebody's going to look at it, and then we're going to stick it in a box, and then I'm never going to use it, and then we're going to repeat this every day. It is a waste of money. It is disrespectful to these people, and it's not giving us the intended benefit even if you wrote the world's best one, mm-hmm. if there's no conversation.
Yeah.
And by the way, if the conversation means like two people, we'll talk about this more, I know, but like it's a conversation, not a speech, not an interrogation, not a reading event. And if you don't do that, then the whole thing was just a giant waste of time and money. And worse off, it's sort of what's happening is it's created this cloak that people think they're protected. They think, I had a pre-test plan. Well, good for us. We're good. I got to write a piece of paper. So everybody's safe. Safety system working good. Mm-hmm. Maybe not. So that's why it's super, super important to get at it. Not to mention like all the cool stuff you can do with it if you learn from it. But hope my answer wasn't too long.
Yeah. No, well, my specialty, Barry, as you know, is asking a question that has like 4 questions wrapped up inside of it. And then you get to kind of pick your direction if you're not flummoxed by the whole thing. Now let's take a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors. Boise Cascade helps you move faster and build stronger, making it easier to get more done. How? Products like Versalam LVL lead the industry in strength. Their BCI joists make framing solid, squeak-free floors simple. That means fewer callbacks and happier homeowners. They also have powerful software tools that provide fast, simple, and easy to understand engineering analysis on projects in only a few clicks. Want more? Have you heard of their SawTech technology? It's an all-in-one saw solution that lets you streamline the cutting, labeling, and assembling process of engineered wood products into one job pack for your builders. SawTech processes EWP faster with fewer mistakes while boosting profitability and efficiency. And it's all backed up by real people. Boise Cascade's professional, knowledgeable in-house sales and support teams are ready to answer questions and solve problems, keeping you focused on your business. Learn more by visiting bc.com/EWP. Faster, stronger, easier. It's not just what Boise Cascade does, it's who they are. Well, let me ask you this. I thought this was a really valuable tool, and I think we should find a way, share a link, whatever way. We'll make sure guys are directed towards it. The Simple 7, I think this leads up to an important part where, all right, we know conversations are important, and we realize, I think that's such a great analogy. What you did is, let's picture this exact same process in a slightly different context that we also engage in every day. Oh, but it's different because it's on the job site. No, it isn't. So maybe let's run through here. You have the Simple 7 of basically the elements of a strong safety planning conversation. The first one you have is leader engagement. I feel like engagement is one of the most overused words right now because it can kind of apply to anything. And we're hearing it in a lot of different places, and consultants that may or may not look like me are trying to use it in different ways to mean like, I don't even know. Are we working together better? What does that mean? When you talk about leader engagement in terms of the strong safety planning conversations, what does that look like? Because that's number one for you.
By the way, I'm so glad you said that about the engagement thing. You know, everybody's talking about engagement. So yes, that's a whole separate topic. I would love to go down that thread. It's an important word in this context. What it's really at is, look, use my metaphor I used before. If I have a piece of paper and I'm reading to you, I'm not engaged in the conversation. I'm giving you words, but I'm not engaged. Mm-hmm. If we're asking questions like we are here and we're having a dialogue, you're leading this conversation. You're engaged. You want me to participate, right? And therefore, I'm switched on. But if you're not switched on and you're not engaged and you're not asking me any questions, I'm sitting here waiting for this thing to be over so I can get back to doing whatever it is I'm supposed to be doing. Right. So you might be surprised that just like you had to ask me, the definition is not necessarily clear. And you go out to people and you say, well, are your guys engaged? Do they lead these conversations? Do they care? And you're going to get back. My friend Dan Sadler says, a bunch of people looking at you with like cows looking at a new gate. They're just not going to, they're like, I'm confused what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I think that is, that's part of it, right? Is just, and maybe I should have paired this too. Number 2 is participant engagement, right? And that is you and I, it's not a monologue, right? Monologues are bad. Dialogues are good, right? Confirm understanding. And maybe, can you talk about this and maybe where we bridge the leader engagement, the participant engagement? Okay, this is something we're doing together. The planning and work, really that's the next part here, which I think oftentimes, what's the whole point of this conversation? Well, it's planning. And we jump right there and say, hey, walk me through how as a leader, you are thinking about having a two-way conversation, getting everybody involved so they're turned on and they're tuned in. How does that transition to the planning and work?
Well, this is an interesting question. So we think about these, a lot of times people think about these conversations as just talking about hazards and how we're going to fix the hazard.
Right.
But how humans normally talk is they oftentimes talk about hazards in the context of work. Okay. Right? So they'll say, like, here's the job that we're doing, and implied in it is a certain set of hazards, right? We're going to be working up on the 3rd floor today. We haven't sort of put in the barrier to make sure that we're caring, make sure you're paying attention. Hey, there's a bunch of people going to be coming in today to the hospital that weren't here before. I don't have to necessarily tell you as a speaker in this case that we have to watch out for them. It's implied. As a human, you can figure that out. Yeah. So 2 things need to happen with this discussion of the work is when you see it, some people talk about work and then they talk about the hazards. Some people, when they have these conversations, they only talk about hazards and it's totally fake. So you'll see very quickly, okay, well, wear your PPE, watch out for slips, trips, and falls relative to what? What am I doing? You know what I mean? And so when people talk about the work, you get both pieces. The other thing that's really, really important here, Bradley, is there's always this struggle. Safety guys, and there's both sides. Safety guys want the operational people to be, in quotes, engaged. They want them to participate, right? They want them to be I want to own it. They use lots of different words. And the operational guys are always trying to help the safety guys, but they don't necessarily always know how. Like, well, what do we do? Go do an audit or walk around or go talk to somebody with some abstraction thing. This planning conversation is a natural intersection, organic intersection of those 2 activities. It is a planning conversation. We're talking about the work itself. So what are you going to get? By the way, we do this little thing to measure, like, did you set expectations for the day? Because, by the way, setting expectations has a lot to do with sort of the mental attitude of are they super high expectations? You want me to rush? You don't want me to rush? Right. You can learn a lot by the work and the peripherals around work, which as humans, we pick up and we understand relative to sort of how we're going to think about the hazards and behaviors and the stuff that might get us hurt.
Right. Yeah. So we've kind of deliberately, think intelligently, we'll see, buried the lead here a little bit, but I want to ask you about active caring. That's when you say you move past compliance to care. Okay. You can tell me if this is a dumb question. I'm going to ask it anyway. Can you teach people to care?
Oh, I don't think so. I think you can encourage people to care. Yeah. I think you can provide examples for people to care. And I'll ask you that back to you and I'm really very curious for your thoughts on this. But look, if you take out all of the stuff, you take all the safety stuff, you take all of this. And by the way, active caring is a Geller term. I picked that up from him years and years ago. I don't really care what people's thoughts are about whether you like Geller. Some people like him, some don't. Look, guys spent a whole lot of time thinking about this topic and spent a whole bunch of research on this topic. And I think he nailed for sure this thing, and we all owe it to him. Actively caring. And so what he's really getting at is, do you try and help other people, right? Period. Are you creating an environment where not only you do that, but other people want to do that? And high-performing organizations, that happens because humans respond very, very well to that. And so if you can get your arms around, and by the way, we know this is obvious, right? If you hire employees who care about something, let's say they care about the right things like other people, as opposed to just making a buck, but at least they care about something, you got a running shot.
Yeah. And it's an interesting question to ask where you say, hey, does this person care? And you alluded to it, like, what do they care about? Because sometimes they care very passionately about the industry. They love building. They care deeply about this project. But you say, do you care deeply and do you express that daily about this person or that crew? Well, that's a different conversation, because sometimes the industry and our passion for the work and building, that's one thing. Humans are tricky. Sometimes humans make it hard for us to care about them. Where a lot of our conversation came about was me being involved in a different way with our clients, which is, hey, at some level, we largely have male, we largely have white, we largely have English-speaking people who are running these jobs. And then the closer you get to the actual work, we have significantly more Hispanics who generally prefer to, or many of them speak only Spanish. So we kind of have that. As you start thinking about the future of your organization, the future of these conversations and changing the culture, how does that kind of tie in? And what sort of questions are you asking about, hey, what happens when we have folks who are culturally different or linguistically different?
A lot of good questions, a lot of stuff wrapped up in that one. So I think this is another thing where, it's a tragedy. I see this all the time. We have these people who are doing these things in one language, but they don't speak that language, right? They're trying to just muck their way through it. That's one part. And then there's the other side of it where they'll do it in their native tongue and then they give it to someone else who doesn't speak that language. So there's literally, the two parties are not talking to each other. And so it is a sin, and it's a personal passion to fix that problem. And so I know that's not exactly what you're going to ask, but before we even get to the whole culture and fixing it, which is we have a fundamental communication problem in many cases, compounded with everything else we've been talking about for the last few minutes.
Yeah.
I think you touched on something that's so important, which is, and this applies it doesn't matter whether you're Spanish or English, it's about culture. Mm-hmm. I thought these were about conversations in the beginning. And then I realized they're not really about conversations. They're really about all the stuff that happened before the conversation starts. The conversations are a reflection of the person talking. What did they know? What was their first job? What do they believe? What do they care about? What do they understand about hazards? Do they speak the language? Do they care about the language? Do they understand the other culture? Mm-hmm. All those things are reflected in the conversation. They aren't created in the conversation. They don't happen. They just happen as a moment in time.
Yeah.
So what these conversations become are sort of atomic units to understand what's the real culture that we have right now. What's the real problem that we really need to deal with? And it might be the way you're behaving with this other person who has this other sort of Spanish culture or whatever. It's just not constructive. It's just not going to work. Or you don't understand the purpose of this system in the first place. Or, and this is one that is so, so important, you're having this conversation, and all the behavioralists out there I know are nodding along with me right now. You're having this conversation because your boss has told you this is the kind of conversation you're supposed to have, and you're just doing it. Mm-hmm. Whether he told you that directly or indirectly. So it really becomes a way for us to use these conversations to understand the health, not only of the system, safety systems in this case, but to really understand what kind of senior leadership messaging is getting to our frontline leaders. Who are they hiring? Who are they supporting? What are they encouraging? They talk about, we're really engaged, blah, blah, blah. You find out in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 conversations very, very quickly where people are or organizations are on the journey. And I think that's that for us as an industry, and that in terms of like trying to reduce accidents and injuries, language included in there. I mean, it further complicates the problem, as you this is why I'm very grateful for you and what you're doing. It makes it even harder when you got a language problem. But even in English, senior leaders, executives do not have a way to see a direct line between their beliefs and their cultures and those people who are pounding the nails. Mm-hmm. Yet, every day we invest 10 to 15 minutes of time where there's an opportunity to peer into that and connect the dots to say, what the heck is really happening? Are we talking about the work? Are we setting expectations? Do you care? Are you going to be, don't talk to people that way. That's not how I would. And I think when executives see that, that's when the lights come on and they're like, this is an important problem for me to better understand where we are and think through what we're going to do.
Yeah. So let's stick on that for senior leaders that are listening to this and say they either intuitively know or they're collaborating, they're hearing firsthand, I now have awareness. I now have insight into these conversations. And I realize there's a disconnect between the organization that we want to be, how we behave, how we collaborate with each other. We have a gap between where we are now and where we want to go. How hard is it, or how do you help them think through? Because part of this is really developing a culture that wants to record and think about itself, and then also identify mistakes when I believe there's a human nature component here where humans sometimes, if we're not great at something or we screw up something, we want to let as few people as possible to know about that. How do we kind of connect those dots to make this all possible?
This is a really good question too. So I always tell people, I was writing some about this today, which is we have to decide first, do you want to solve the problem? And then you have to define what is the problem that you want to solve, right? So the first question that we have here is, do I see value in improving the conversation between those closest to the work and the frontline leader?
Yeah.
And if the answer to that is yes, then I tell people, look, before you get too crazy about fixing anything, just go get 25 conversations. And there's an easy way to do it. Just go get 25 conversations, 10 conversations. You could do it literally in a couple of weeks. By the way, we spend all this fortune on all these surveys to figure out what your culture is and all that stuff. If you want a hot tip for today, it's super cheap, nothing disrespect to all the culture people out there. Just go record 25 conversations and then watch them. Just get a bag of popcorn. Just go watch them. And ask yourself a very simple question, which is, am I proud of what's happening? And if you're not proud, talk to the people that are around you in the group and say, what can we do about this? Why do we think these people think what they're doing is a good idea? And what are we doing? I'm talking about the senior leaders. Yeah. What are we doing to encourage or discourage them from thinking that way?
Yeah, I want to interject real quick. Sorry. Say someone says, hey, I'm with you. You say go get 25 conversations. What do you mean by that? Can you break that down to like literally what do you want me to do? If someone's listening, be like, I like where you're going. What do you mean? Get the conversations.
Well, so I'm being very simple. I don't want to be this advertising thing, but if you go to FactorLab.com, there's a little thing called Smart Tag It. We have this product. We give it to people for 30 days. You don't have to spend any money. The point is just come talk to us and we'll give you a little application. You can download it and we'll show you how it works. And then you can capture these conversations, like bring them all together. You can think of it as sort of a little private YouTube you can have for your own organization. Okay. So it doesn't cost anything. It's not a big deal. And then you can have them. And that's the point. Before you start trying to fix something, just where are you, right? Yeah. And then into your question earlier, don't get ahead of yourself in terms of like how you're going to fix something until you understand what it is and think about how am I creating constraints and what am I doing as a senior leader and what can I do to make this better on all those people who I guarantee you are trying their very best to do what they think you want them to do in these circumstances.
Right.
And I think if you approach the problem from that way, so there's this kind of this top-down thing and bottom-up stuff. If you approach it from that angle, you'll get a much better result. For example, you go out and you say, okay, look, I want to get better at my daily planning conversations. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to browbeat people by training them and teaching them. Right. But they turn around and they already know that their supervisor could give a rat's flip about this conversation. What are they going to do? They're not going to do anything different. Why would I do that? So it's not going to happen. However, on the other hand, you say, look, we're going to get better at this conversation. It's super important to us because we can less rework, keep people longer. I care about you, blah, blah, blah. Let's get better. Let's work together. By the way, sorry, I forgot to tell you this, Bradley. This was a big, big deal. I'm going to give out a gift card 30 days into this thing, and the guy who has the best daily planning conversation. Provide a little positive reinforcement around the behavior that you want. And I'm going to show, the CEO, I'm going to show you, look, here's Julio. He did a great job today. Look what a great job he's leading the conversation. That changes behavior. That changes culture. That communicates clearly, this is what we believe in. This is what's important to us. And they believe me. These people are looking for the clues. I'm like, got it. That's what I need to do. On it, boss. I'll do a good job.
Yeah, it's interesting how often, and I certainly don't think this is unique to the construction industry, but we know in the medical profession, when we start trying to fix something before a doctor diagnoses it, that's called malpractice. That's generally frowned upon. But for us, sometimes we get so excited, or we're like, oh my gosh, did we realize how much this injury costs? Or let's extrapolate the direct and indirect costs. And oh my gosh, we have a multi-million-dollar problem without even trying hard on the math. Let's get in here. Let's do A, B, and C. We're like, hold on. That's one part. And the other part, I just had a conversation this past week, middle management, concrete workers, averaging somewhere between 80 and 90% turnover annually. And this guy is just like, I'm at wit's end. We got to change the culture. We're doing this and this. And the stakes for this person in middle management were extremely high. The follow-up calls with executive leadership, and they said, listen, we're on 3 consecutive years. Every year for the last 3 years has been our best year in terms of revenue and profitability. Things are pretty good. So then I was like, okay, if the stakes aren't there, then let's be honest with ourselves. What are we trying to solve? What are the stakes? And what do we think is really important here? But be honest with yourselves, because these half measures really just kind of muddy the water and it becomes just another flavor of the day.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I'm watching the time here. You mentioned one of the books. One question I always want to learn is from folks like you, are there any really important, influential books? The one you just mentioned was Decision Traps.
Yep. Don't ask me who the author is. But Decision Traps is very good.
Okay.
You can get it out there. It's out there. It's been around for a long time. Again, this is like 20 years ago, but I really love that book. There's another one that's out now. It's new. It's called The Attributes by Rich Davini. I hope I'm saying his name correctly. I'm reading it now. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. This guy was the trainer for the Navy SEALs, but he's really getting at what is the stuff that separates people that goes beyond skills, right? So if you go, what is it? What is it? Is it grit? Is it attitude? And he's really honest, candid assessment of thinking through high-performing people and what really helps them do it. And so some of it is quite controversial. So, he's talking about sometimes not the nicest people can be really successful.
Yeah.
And so there's different coping mechanisms that get people through different ways, and we're all wired differently. And so I think it's I'm not done with it yet, but I think it's a thoughtful book on a really important topic. And there's one more, if you want more, Chatter.
I do.
Yeah, Chatter. Have you read this
Chatter.
one? This is very good. Ethan Cost. This is really good. Chatter is all about, and this one is something that I struggle with personally, and it's that stuff that's inside my head. How do you deal with that guy that's inside of your own head, and how do you cultivate that to have the right thing? Plus, I have a 10-year-old son, and I'm trying to help get the chatter in his head in the same way so that he hopefully can make great decisions as he goes forward. So Chatter's another one. Ethan Cross. That's a new one out. Hope you like that.
I love this. I read a lot. I enjoy reading. I didn't know any 3 of these books. So this is great. I appreciate you sharing. We'll make sure we link to these in the show notes here. I know you're being overly deferential. I'd like to force you, because I think it's that important. And I certainly don't do this with all my guests who in one way, shape, or form, they're selling something. I need you to put on your kind of greedy capitalistic hat for a minute. I want to make sure if they listen to this and they're like, there's something here. We need to do better. I'm curious. How can they scratch that itch? Talk about FactorLab. Where can they learn more about you? The white paper. And again, I'm a reader. I really enjoyed your white paper. It's really well done. It's kind of that perfect length where not too long, not too short. There's a lot of meat, shared a lot of the research that was there. The Simple 7, where can people learn more about you, FactorLab, what you're doing?
Thank you for that. It's very nice of you to do that. And you're right. I do feel a little uncomfortable about it because I hate these things where people are trying to peddle stuff as opposed to just talk about important ideas. And I do hope that people take out of this stuff, like genuinely everything I'm talking about is, if you can do it with your own phone, do it with your own phone. It doesn't change anything. The technology makes it easier, and it's some thoughtful stuff, so you don't have to do some of the stuff because that's a distraction. But the point is the same stuff. Help work on these conversations and get stuff going. So that said,
Yeah.
FactorLab.com, Factor Lab. And by the way, factors, lots of factors influence complex decisions. That's where that comes from. And treat it like a lab. Don't, by the way, think about these problems like reducing incidents or getting better at productivity, not as a, hey, there's a root cause, let me go fix it thing. So that's the company. We have a couple products. Smart Tag It is the product. You may have heard of it. You go to the website, you can see it, Smart Tag It. It's a nice little, very easy to use next generation application for reducing accidents and injuries in the workplace. You can think of it as sort of Instagram meets data science meets safety. You can certainly go, if you go to News and Insights, we have a lot of great blog posts there. Yep. You can get the Simple 7 there. You'll also see a bunch of good stories about what people are doing. You'll see blog posts. We put a bunch of stuff up there. And then also on the homepage, download the white paper. I really encourage people to, anybody who's kind of a nerd in this space, download the white paper. It's free. Stick your email in there so I can at least talk to you if you want to. But what it looks like, I want to talk to people who care about the topic and are interested. And by the way, who want to make it better. I think it's an important part of maybe message I do leave with this. We don't pretend to have all the answers. We have some answers. We had the Simple 7. Someone got to make it Simple 8. I don't care. I want it to be useful and effective. We didn't build the last mathematical model in the world. We built a mathematical model. Good for us. We share it. You know what I mean? So it's come and join us if you're out there and you care about this space. We can't do it by ourselves. We want to work with other people who care and want to work on the problem that has an impact for people.
And that's where, talk about really bearing the lead at the very end. But when you initially said, well, hey, picture kind of Instagram, short videos, data science and safety, that's where it was immediately like a punch to the jaw. Like, oh, all right. I see what we're talking about here. And of course, we're not going to get into it now, but I think you also share enough of someone who's curious and just know enough to be dangerous when we talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning. But you walk through, say, okay, well, here's what's happening. You kind of just casually mentioned kind of the PhDs who you were collaborating with in New York and Buffalo, and basically how we're thinking through of dissecting this and turning it into ones and zeros, I think it's a little snapshot into where we're going, and it's really exciting. So I appreciate you making time. FactorLab, we're going to include all of this in our show notes. Again, Barry, appreciate you making time for this, and always enjoy talking to you.
I could not be more grateful. It's a pleasure. You're such a gentleman, and thanks for doing this and letting us have this thing. I hope we get a chance to do it again, and I really am grateful. So thank you very much.
Well, you got some big fans in our network who I know well, and they do not throw compliments around lightly. So I think we'll have to plan kind of a round 2 where we bring in someone who's firsthand doing this, collaborating with you, and have a little 3-way conversation. I look forward to that. As always, thank you for listening. I hope you found my conversation with Mr. Barry Nelson of FactorLab to be worth your time and attention. Now, our goal here is to make this the best podcast you listen to. I'd love to hear your thoughts, ideas for future shows, and potential guests, or if you have any sales fundamentals you want to talk about, or very specific builder scenarios that you're struggling with that you want us to noodle on and give you some different alternatives. I would love to do that. We would love to do that for you. So do not hesitate to email me directly at bradley@behindyourbacksales.com. Bradley@behindyourbacksales.com. Feel free to link up with me on LinkedIn or connect on Instagram at BehindYourBackCEO. Now, we've been thrilled with our growth over the past, couple of years as we're going on 200 episodes. I just want to say many of you have been extremely generous recently with leaving reviews. And for folks that are helping us on the marketing side, they're like, hey, knucklehead, ask for more reviews from your listeners. If they get value from it, having them complete a quick review online is a small act that means a lot. So you should ask more. I hesitate to do that because I know you're busy. However, I will say this. Those mean more to us than you know, and they always help. So thank you very much. We enjoy doing this, and hopefully we're giving you some value and unique perspectives. So that's all I got. We're going to close out like we always do. And thank you. You, my friends, you're owed nothing. Deliver value first.